So, in my last video, we talked about how the Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous empire in history. In this one, we're going to talk about how they got to that point, or at least their early history. Just as a heads up before we start, I don't speak Old or Modern Mongolian, so I'm trying my best here with the pronunciations. Sorry if I butcher anything. The history of the Mongol Empire began in 1162 with the birth of Temujin. Temujin was born into a noble Mongol family. His great-uncle sat at the head of the Khamag Confederacy, and his father was the head of his clan. During Temujin's youth, the power of the Khamag Confederacy had started to wane, overshadowed by the Tartar and Kharid confederacies. The confederacy was unstable, with different member clans fostering rivalries and vying for control over the whole thing. This uneasy alliance was just about all the clans had, though, as they were surrounded by enemy tribes. When Temujin was 9 years old, his father arranged for him to marry a 10-year-old girl from the Kongirad tribe, who were friendly with Temujin's clan. Temujin's father took him to live with his future bride's family until he reached a marriageable age at 12. What can I say, people? It was the Middle Ages. Anywho, Temujin's father was intercepted and poisoned by rival Tartars while returning home from delivering Temujin. Temujin went back to his clan to be with his family and claim his father's place. But when he arrived back, he found out that the clan had shunned his family and moved on without them. For the next few years, they lived in poverty, mainly feeding themselves by hunting. During this time, Temujin's older half-brother, Begtar, became head of the family. He and his full brother were brutes, snatching away birds and fish that their younger half-siblings had caught, which fostered resentment between the two halves of the family. As it turns out, living alone on the Mongolian steppes surrounded by well-trained archers who hate your guts is not a great recipe for a long and healthy life. Temujin and his younger brother cornered and killed Begtar while he was out watching the horses. After this point, Temujin's other half-brother, Belgutai, was smart enough to take a backseat to Temujin. Temujin first began gaining a reputation after an event in 1177. Temujin's family were attacked by their former allies, the Taichiyut, a prominent tribe within the Khamag Confederacy. The Taichiyut just wanted Temujin, but his family sent him fleeing on horseback instead of turning him over. The Taichiyut chased him into a thicket, where, according to legend, he stayed hidden with no food for 9 days before finally emerging and being captured. During a feast, Temujin was left under the guard of a single man, holding him on a leash. The story specifically referred to this guard as a weakling, so it should come as no surprise that Temujin was able to yank the leash from the guard's hands when they were left alone. He bashed the guard over the head and ran off to a nearby river, where he floated on his back so that only his face was visible. Sorkan Shira, a member of the Taichiyuts, whose family had taken pity on Temujin during his captivity, helped Temujin to avoid discovery as he floated on the river, and after the Taichiyut search party gave up, he gave Temujin refuge in his home. Chulun, one of Sorkan Shira's sons, would later become an important ally to Temujin. Temujin would gain some more allies shortly after this event, after he had returned to his family and settled back into a normal life, when his family found all but one of their horses captured by robbers. Temujin took the remaining horse and set off after the robbers. While on their trail, Temujin came across a man named Borchu, who lent him a rested horse and joined him in tracking down the robbers. The two of them found the robbers and, after an intense chase, made off with the stolen horses. Temujin offered Borchu a share of the horses as payment for his help, but Borchu refused, claiming that he had helped Temujin because he was in need, not for any payment. From that point forward, Borchu would be one of Temujin's closest and most loyal friends. Around this time, Temujin started to realize that he needed more allies. With no clan and only a few friends, he and his family were at the mercy of bandits and larger tribes. He decided to meet with the Khan of the Kharites, Turul, who had been his father's Anda, or blood brother. Turul is a rather interesting figure. His people had converted to Nestorian Christianity in the early 11th century, making Turul one of the few prominent Christian rulers in Eastern Asia. He would eventually be conflated with the legendary figure of Prester John by Europeans, and would be referred to by that name in the writings of Marco Polo. Anyway, Turul accepted Temujin's request for an alliance, setting up the basis for Temujin's eventual rise to power. That whole arranged marriage thing I mentioned earlier never actually went away, and Temujin returned to his fiancée, Burte, in 1178. Her family were delighted to see him return, and they were married shortly thereafter. Incidentally, horses weren't the only targets for kidnapping in Mongolia at this time, and Burte ended up getting yoinked during a market raid on Temujin's family camp within a few years of the marriage. Temujin was by all accounts rather distraught about losing his wife, and turned to Turul for help. Turul lent him 20,000 warriors to wage war against the Merkits, and suggested he enlist the help of his childhood friend and Anda, Jamukha. With the help of Jamukha and the 20,000 Kharid warriors, Temujin absolutely steamrolled the Merkits, enslaved all their women and children, and had a tearful reunion with his by now very pregnant wife after laying siege to the camp where she was being held. Keep in mind that at this point, Borte had been the wife to one of her captors for about 8 months, which would end up preventing the kid from fully enjoying the role of Temujin's firstborn. But Temujin himself never questioned whether the child was his. Anyway, unfortunately for Temujin, this victory would mark the beginning of the end for his relationship with Jamukha. While they'd worked well together in their fight against the Merkits, the two men had very different values. Jamukha was much more of a traditionalist, and valued the Mongol system of nobility. Temujin, meanwhile, perhaps shaped by his life of fighting for himself and getting little out of his noble ancestry, held a much more meritocratic viewpoint, promoting warriors on the basis of skill, not bloodline. Temujin's methods drew many lower-class people to his side, while Jamukha retained the favor of the elites. Both of the two began consolidating their power, and Temujin was elected as the Khan of the Mongols in 1186, after a shaman came forward to tell him of a vision showing that his rule was the will of the Skyfather Tengri. With this election, Temujin took on a name that may be more familiar to the average person, Chinggis Qahan, meaning something along the lines of either wide-spreading Khan or true Khan. The election of Temujin to the position of Khan enraged Jamukha, who reportedly accused those of his former allies who had joined Temujin of orchestrating the election to split Temujin and him apart. 1 year later, Jamukha's younger brother was killed while trying to steal horses from an ally of the Qahan, and Jamukha cemented the end of their friendship by launching a retaliatory attack against Temujin in what is known as the Battle of Dalan Baljut. Jamukha handily defeated his old friend, and boiled the 70 princes of one of Temujin's allied tribes alive and tied the head of their chief to his horses to be dragged behind him as he rode. Holy shit. As it turns out, this was apparently enough to make some of Jamukha's allies ask themselves, are we the baddies? And hop over to Temujin's side. Now we've got to look back to Turul to fill in some more context here for later. When Turul took power around 1165, he started eliminating potential usurpers with some good old-fashioned fratricide. One of his brothers dodged the executioner, however, and headed west to take shelter with the Naimon tribe, where he seems to have stayed right up until the defeat of Chinggis Qahan. This defeat weakened the Mongols, which in turn weakened the Kharids too. Turul's brother seized the opportunity to charge in with his Naimon friends and take over around 1195. Turul was exiled, and first went to the western Yao in Central Asia to fruitlessly request aid, before turning to Temujin in 1196. Temujin gave Turul shelter, and carried out a campaign against the remaining Merkit clans. Temujin handed the loot from these attacks over to Turul, who essentially used it to bribe a number of Kharid clans into coming back to his side. Temujin's history gets a bit fuzzy for a while after his defeat at the Battle of Dalan Baljut. Mongol and Yuan dynasty sources on the period curiously omit about a decade of Temujin's life. According to the Yuan Shi, a source compiled during the early Ming dynasty, after the Mongols lost control of China, Chinggis Qahan spent a time paying yearly tribute to the Jurchen Jin dynasty of northern China. While bias in this source is possible, it does make sense with what we know happened next. The Jin dynasty waged a war against the Tartars in 1197, and they approached Chinggis Qahan to aid them. If Temujin were a vassal in the Jin court at the time, it makes sense why they'd turn to him for help. Anyway, vassal or not, the result was the same. The Tartars had been causing trouble for the Mongols for decades. Remember, this was the same tribe who killed Temujin's dad, so the Qahan was perfectly happy to accept. The Jin also extended the request to Turul, whose grandfather had also been killed by the Tartars. Another Mongol tribe, the Jurkins, were also approached, but Temujin quit waiting after they failed to show up for 6 days. Remember those guys for later. Temujin and his allies had a great deal of success, and seeing the riches he was able to loot from the Tartars, much of which originated in China, may have given Temujin an idea for the future. When Temujin returned to his base camp after defeating the Tartars, he found that while he was gone, the 50 people who'd been left behind had been raided by Jurkins, who had killed 10 people during their attack, and stolen the clothes of the rest. As people probably should have started to figure out by now, messing with Chinggis Qahan was not a good idea. A very angry Temujin marched his army after the Jurkins, plundered them, and sent their 2 chiefs, Sechebeki and Taichu, fleeing. Temujin's men eventually cornered the two, and the few men who'd escaped with them, and the chiefs were taken prisoner. According to the secret history of the Mongols, Seche Beki and Taichu admitted wrongdoing and volunteered their necks for beheading, to which Temujin responded by suffocating them. As one does. With the Jurchen chiefs dead and their men taken captive, Temujin now had a whole bunch of fresh new faces to add to his army. This was something Temujin did a lot, adding conquered people to his ranks. See, as Temujin began building his power up once more, his meritocratic ideals came in handy for rallying the support and expanding his army. Temujin recruited strong warriors from defeated tribes, and promised allies and civilian subjects a share of any spoils his troops captured during war. This, along with his habit of promoting troops based on their skill rather than class, helped Temujin to become increasingly powerful with each conquest he completed, as more people joined his ranks, and those already supporting him were rewarded with spoils from each new conquest, cementing their loyalty. Unfortunately for Temujin, his increasing power rubbed some people the wrong way, and this is something that we'll cover in the next video. Sorry to drop this on you guys, but this is going to be a two-parter. I hope to do basically just a long-form adaptation of the secret history of the Mongols, but this script alone took a lot longer than I anticipated, so I decided to quit while I was ahead. Next time we'll discuss how Temujin dealt with Jamukha, and how his luck with allies didn't change quite yet, in addition to his continued rise to power. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe for part 2. I'll see you next time, guys.